So the whole objective here is we need to provide our seedlings with the right kind of light. The obvious question is how? In the world of home gardening, there's no subject more needlessly complicated than grow lights. In today's video, I'm going to demystify grow lights. We're going to discuss what you need to know to grow healthy seedlings at home. By the end of this lesson, you'll know what kind of light seedlings need to thrive, how that light is measured, and what information you need to have in order to pick the best grow light for the job. We're also going to cover some basic things like if you already have lights, how to tell if the lights you have will work, how long to keep your lights on, how high should your lights be above your seedlings, and how to tell if your seedlings and plants are getting too much light or too little light, and what to do about it. Let's start with the basics. Plants get their energy through a process called photosynthesis, and a plant needs light, water, and carbon dioxide, and through a complex process the plant creates energy in the form of sugar and oxygen. When we talk about light, we're talking about sunlight, visible light. You probably remember being in science class when you saw that light passed through a glass prism splits into its spectrum of colors: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Plants only use part of that visible spectrum of light for photosynthesis. It's in a range of wavelength between 400 and 700 nanometers. And you can see from this chart what that means in terms of color. The light that's used by plants is called photosynthetically active radiation, PAR. And plants use blue light and red light the most. Blue light is essential for regulating plant growth, especially during seedling development. Red light is vital for flowering and fruiting. As home gardeners, we need to provide our seedlings with the optimal conditions to thrive and grow into healthy plants. And just like outside, different plants need different kinds of light. And we're focused specifically in this lesson on the light required to grow seedlings. So the whole objective here is we need to provide our seedlings with the right kind of light. The obvious question is how? There's three important considerations when providing light to plants: the quality of the light, the intensity of the light, and the duration of the light. When we talk about the quality of the light, we're talking specifically about providing the right wavelength of light to our seedlings and plants. The color of the light. This is the light that the plant uses for photosynthesis. This is PAR. We just talked about that this is the spectrum of visible light that plants use specifically for photosynthesis. And that's the only light that plants care about. When we talk about light intensity, we're talking about how much of that useful PAR light is actually reaching the leaves of our plants and seedlings. And this amount of light has the funniest name. It's called photosynthetic photon flux density, or PPFD. When we talk about the duration of light, we're talking about the amount of useful light that's delivered within an area in a 24-hour period of time. This is the most important measurement when it comes to plants and seedlings, and it's called the daily light integral, or DLI. So now that we know we need to be aware of the quality, the intensity, and the duration of light, we're going to find out how we use these characteristics to determine if we've got the right light for our plants. DLI is measuring the total amount of the light that's used for photosynthesis that a plant receives in 24 hours. Different plants have different DLI requirements, and we are going to be focused specifically on the DLI requirements for seedlings. So this chart, courtesy of the Michigan State University Extension Office, shows you the different DLI requirements for different crops. And you can see in this chart that the DLI requirements for seedlings, early grown seedlings, is 6 to 10. Later seedlings are requiring 10 to 15. So if we use a value of 10 for our DLI requirements for our seed starting, that's going to be perfect. In order to calculate the DLI for your specific setup at home, we're going to use this equation. DLI is equal to PPFD times the hours that your lights are on times 0.0036. The only information that we really need in order to solve this equation is the value for PPFD. More expensive grow light manufacturers include the PPFD values for their specific light designs. But this isn't generally the case for more affordable lights. PPFD is measured with a device called a par meter, and these specialized meters are quite expensive to purchase, and it really doesn't make sense for a home gardener to spend that kind of money unless we're actually growing crops for profit. Lucky for us, there's smartphone apps available that can determine the PPFD for our setups, and in the next lesson, I'm going to introduce you to one. So the app that I found that I have loaded on my smartphone is Photone, and this is an excellent app. You can go to their website and read all about the different information. It'll tell you how to set it up, how accurate it is, some of the benefits. It gives you little tips on how to use it. And you can see here that it also provides the average error compared to different meters. So the app itself is really easy to use. So once you download it, you're just going to click on the app. And one of the first things that you're going to notice when you turn it on is it's going to tell you that you have a diffuser required. Now, if you tap on that Learn More, you're going to find out you don't necessarily need to buy a diffuser. You can if you want to, but on their website, it will show you how to create a diffuser out of just a white piece of paper. And at the bottom here, if you tap on the button, you can scroll through here to see the different sources of light. Now you'll notice that some of these features are locked, and you have to, that the app itself is free, but the way that they're earning a living is, certain features that you want, in order to unlock them, you need to pay a fee. So in this case, my lights are LED full spectrum lights. So in order for me to use that option, I needed to pay a one-time fee of $6.49. And once you select your light source, you have a few different options as far as the measurements are concerned. So you can see here, I'm just measuring this right by my computer. And this is measuring the light by my computer is 15 ppfd. And you can also measure the daily light integral. Now you'll notice up here that there's like a 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours. So that's calculating the daily light integral if the light source that it's reading was on for 12 hours, 18 hours, or 24 hours. And again, you've got illuminance in lux. And then if in order to actually read the color temperature of a light, this is another locked feature. This feature, in order to unlock it, you would actually need to pay a subscription. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I personally think that just being able to measure the value for the PPFD is what we need, because we know how long we're going to keep our grow lights on, and we're going to use that to calculate what our DLI is for our specific setups, and that can help us. And in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to use this app to calculate the DLI for your setup. I'll be sure to leave a link to this app in the lesson resources. Hello, so we are here again in my kitchen, and today I'm going to show you how I'm going to use the Photone app to help me make some decisions about my grow lights. The first exercise I want to do here in the kitchen is I have 3 lights in front of me. I've got a full spectrum LED bulb, 6500 Kelvin, which means that the color of the bulb skews towards the blue end of the spectrum, which is perfect for vegetative growth and perfect for seedlings. This light costs roughly $50 for a set of 6 of them. I also have what is considered to be a full spectrum LED grow light. So this light, the manufacturer actually provided the PPFD readings for, and the light that I'm going to measure here with our app, I'm going to do it in 2 different configurations. I've got the light outfit with these metal shades, and the purpose of the shades is to just kind of keep the light directed towards the seedlings. And I'm curious on the PPFD readings for that versus just having the light without the shade. So we're going to go ahead and measure that too. Now, I understand that these are not controlled experiment conditions. We are in my kitchen. I've got other light sources here from the lights above. There is going to be light spillover. But what we're going to do here, we're not trying to do a PhD project. We're home gardeners just trying to assess, does it make sense for us to spend more money on a more expensive grow light? And can we really tell the difference in a setup condition like we're going to grow in? Now, the one thing I will say is, I'm not expecting that the PPFD values that I get from this particular experiment are going to be exactly the same as the manufacturer provided. We need to keep in mind that the manufacturer is taking their measurements with a different type of meter, likely, and they're also doing it, in a more controlled setting. I honestly expect that what we'll see is that PPFD readings for the manufacturing numbers will probably be higher than the numbers that we're going to read here. But I don't know that for a fact. That's why we're going to measure it. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn this light on and take some readings with my smartphone here. So like I said, I've got my paper diffuser that I'll put on here, and I'm just going to take several readings and record those readings. And I'll show what the readings are up on the screen, and then we'll get an average. All right, so let's talk about the findings. So the first set of measurements that I did would be the grow light without the shields. So I measured a PPFD of 45, 63, and 46, 47, 67, 46, 46, 60, and 45. So you can see here that right under the light, the PPFD is higher. That just makes sense. It's got the shield on it, so the light on the edges is a little bit lower regarding relative to the PPFD. So now if I compare that to the readings that I took with the shields, we've got PPFD of 56, 67, and 62 on the top edge, 72 and 71 along the center of the shelf. Then we have 58, 59, and 51 at the edge. And then we've got the regular shop light, the 6500 Kelvin shop light. On the top edge, we measured a PPFD of 32, 34, and 29. Along the center, we've got 37, 40, and 33. And on these edges at the bottom, we've got 27, 29, and 25. So again, you can see that right under the light, the PPFD is a little bit higher than on the edges. That just makes sense. Definitely when we look at these numbers, what we're seeing is the grow light with the shields had the highest PPFD in the center. It's still, even with the shields on it, along the edges, it was still a little bit less. And the PPFD for the LED shop light is overall lower than the PPFD for the grow light. Now I did the same exact setup for the lights in my basement, and I've got 5 of the LED shop lights running along the top of the shelf. And with the distance of 12 inches from the shelf, the light being 12 inches from where I was taking the reading, my PPFD values were 112, 152, and 114. And in the center it was 135, 167, and 132. And then at the bottom, the PPFD measured 116, 143, and 10. Now I also moved the lights lower. So I moved the lights to represent the lights being 4 inches from the plants. And those PPFD readings were 235, 220 and 160 on the edges. We had 270, 270, and 190 along the middle. And we had 217, 230, and 192 along the bottom edge there. And what you're seeing here with this fall off is the light is not as long as the shelf is. So the light is not directly over these readings. So that would be something to take into account. So if I add up all of these readings that I took and divide by the number of readings, I end up with an average PPFD of around 220. So now if I were to use the DLI equation, which is DLI is PPFD times the hours I keep the lights on times a conversion factor of 0.036. The DLI, if we have 220 PPFD and we keep the lights on for 16 hours a day, so this value is 12.67 DLI. And you'll remember that we said we needed basically 10 for seedlings. So this is well within the limit. I found today's exercise so incredibly interesting and useful. Now we've got an equation that we can use to evaluate whether our lights are going to be what our seedlings need. We've got an equation. We can use the smartphone app to measure the PPFD. We can take that reading and put it into the equation and see if we've got the right daily light index, if our plants are receiving the right amount of light for photosynthesis in a 24-hour period of time. Now, I'm going to be sure to include a link to all the resource material that we discussed in the lesson, as well as the equation so that you've got it for easy reference. Now, the obvious question becomes, what happens if your DLI value isn't correct? So your DLI can either be well within the range, so your setup is perfect. It could be too high or it could be too low. So if it's too high, the option is to raise your lights. So we know if we raise lights farther away from the plant, the PPFD value will decrease. The closer we get to the plants, the higher the PPFD value. Now, you can get the plants, you can get the light as close as you need to, as long as you're not damaging the plants. Luckily with LED lights, they don't really give off a lot of heat, so you can get them fairly close to the plants. The other way that you can increase or decrease DLI is to actually increase the number of bulbs that you have for your particular light setup or decrease the number of bulbs. For my basement setup, I've got 5 bulbs that I use over the span of a 24-inch shelf that's 4 feet. It's a little bit longer than 4 feet long, 24 inches wide. And it looks like that is going to be great. The measurements did tell me I need to be cautious of the area at the end of the shelf because the shelf is a little bit longer than the 4-foot length of the bulb. So I need to take that into consideration. That was super helpful information because I know that if I put seedlings towards the end of that shelf, they're not going to get as much light. The other thing that we have available to us to change the DLI measurement is to change the amount of time that the lights are actually on. Now, for seedlings, this is not necessarily a big deal to change from, 12 hours or 14 hours or 16 hours. We typically just start with a 16 hours on and 8 hours off as a standard setting for our lights. What I found though with my setup downstairs is I can probably move away from 16 hours a day and go to something more like 14 or 12 hours a day based on the measurements for the PPFD under the lights that I measured. Now, if you were growing plants that were, needed specific periods of daylight on and off, certain flowering plants, like the most common that we all know about are poinsettias, they, When they're grown, it's a very specific regimen of on and off light, and that can't be disturbed, or else the plants won't bloom properly. This isn't really the case for what we're talking about here. So you do have some playing room with the amount of time that the lights are kept on. So that gives us so many options to be able to use what we already have and make it work. And I think that that's the greatest thing. I am going to set up the grow lights, but I am so excited that I learned that my just 6500 Kelvin full spectrum LED shop lights are going to work just perfectly. So I hope that you found this lesson helpful, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Don't forget to look for all the resource material in the lesson resources section just below the video here. That's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.